What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to talk a little bit about torque converters and Impalas and 4L60s, which are life. Everyone loves a 4L60. So I got Eric's Impala over here. We're just putting a different stall torque converter in it. Right now he's got a 4,000 stall. We're going down to a 3,600 just to get a little bit more street driving manners. He doesn't race the car much anymore, so gonna switch it out. You guys can come along for the ride and see how we make this work. All right, so we're moving right along. We have the drive shaft and exhaust out of our way. Got the trans cross member loose. Eric's working on draining some of the fluid out of the trans right now. Pretty simple process getting a transmission out, at least on this car. Hopefully we don't have to pull the headers. All right, so here's our new torque converter from Yank Torque Converter Services out of Nevada, I believe. Is that right?
Thanks, Dave!
Thanks, Dave. So this is an SS 3600. You can see right there. So like I said, a little bit more street friendly. And once we get the transmission out of the Impala, we'll set the two side by side. There should be a diameter difference between them. So normally a bigger diameter means less stall, smaller diameter, more stall. But there's a lot of converter technology that has changed even over the past couple of years. So everything inside here, I don't know what it does. It spins fluid and does things. Eric is struggling bad over here.
I'm just laughing at the stators and all that kind of stuff.
Stators and spinners and couplers and clutches. And anyway, we'll set the two next to each other so you can see the size difference here in a minute. All right, so we just got our torque converter bolts out, so you can see the torque converter spins freely now. Something that's really important is this gap right here. So there's an easy way to measure this. I actually use a drill bit to measure the space in between the torque converter and the flex plate. So you want it between 1/8 and 3/16 of an inch. So, if you have a bigger gap than that, you have to install a spacer in here, usually just a washer, so that the converter doesn't pull out of the transmission too much, like so. Because what will happen is it'll pull out of the pump, and then that's a good way to break the pump inside of the transmission. All right, so still with the new torque converter here, we've got some Valvoline Dexmerk. I like using a name brand, Valvoline, Castrol, something. When you install a torque converter, you want to pre-fill it. So usually I can get about 1 quart of fluid in an aftermarket converter. The reason for this is you don't want to start these dry. You want them to have some fluid moving through them when you fire them up. So we're gonna throw some fluid at this thing real quick. And Eric is working on getting some of the last bolts out before we pull the bell housing bolts, and then we'll lower the trans down. All right, so here are our two torque converters. This is the 4,000, this is the 3,600. Diameter, they're actually about the same. Height, they're a little bit different. So we're letting the fluid go down in this one, and then we'll throw it in the trans, and then we're going back together. All right, so we're gonna do something kind of cool on this Impala. So the transmission lines on the side of the trans are really hard to get to when the transmission is up in the vehicle. And this runs -6 cloth braided lines. So what we're gonna do is where they go into the transmission, we're going to come down about 12 inches and install these guys. So these are Jiffy Tight. They're called dry brakes, and I'll show you how they work real quick. All right, so this is one of our fittings put together. You can see it's just -6 male on both sides, and then they quick disconnect like that. Now these are called a dry brake, so they actually have like a Schrader valve inside of them. So fluid will only pass through while they're connected. So when you disconnect these, no fluid's going to run out. Video of how to install a hose end on an AN line. So you can see we already have a -6 straight end here. We need to put one on this end as well. So I'll show you how this works. So this is just a straight -6 hose end. They're all going to be about the same. These are Russell. So when you pull it apart, you have two different pieces, your sleeve and your insert. So the sleeve is going to thread over the line. Inside here, it's reverse thread. And once it's over the line, this piece is going to thread back into the sleeve. So I'll show you how that works real quick. Your line, you want to make sure that it's cut nice and straight. Take your sleeve, and you can push it on and start to thread it onto your hose. Now, hopefully you can see in here. I'll get under the light. But you want your hose to butt up against the inside threads flush. That way you know you're going to get a good seal on this hose end. The next step is you need to put this in your soft jaws on your vise to keep this from spinning. Take your insert, small amount of lubricant on the threads and on the taper here, and then this starts to thread in to your sleeve. Now it's important when you're threading this in to make sure that you're not pushing the hose out the back end of the collar. So I just usually keep a hand on the hose to make sure that's not happening. I also always use AN wrenches when I'm building these fittings. They're aluminum, so it won't scar up the finish on these fittings. Let me just thread this in until it stops. And that is how you install an AN hose end onto your AN line. Alright guys, so now we're getting ready to put the new converter in. There's going to be 3 splines that you have to line up with. Your stator spline, your input shaft spline, and then your pump back here. So the pump has 2 little tabs on it that you're going to need to line up. You can see one of them right there. So when you install the converter, it's important that you get it fully seated into the pump when you do this. So I'm going to have Eric hold the camera while I throw the converter in this thing.
Ooh, I think you got it. Yeah?
Got it first time. How about that? Alright, so I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see this, but the converter is seated all the way into the transmission. You shouldn't be able to get your hand behind the converter. There should be no space for your hand back here. So when you reach back, you shouldn't be able to reach down and touch the snout of the converter. Alright, so we're looking at our torque converter spacing right here. Here's our 3/16 drill bit, and you can see it does not fit. So if it did fit, we would have to put a spacer in. So what's going to happen is when we install our bolts, it's going to pull the converter out of the pump a little bit, which is what we want because we don't want it to balloon and press into the pump and break it. So we're good here to just go ahead and bolt it up. All right, guys, so we have our quick connects in here, which is going to make doing this transmission a lot easier the next time Eric has to do it. And he's only put about 12 transmissions in this car, so we should be in good shape now. But like I said, so these are a dry brake. So even if you have fluid in here, when you disconnect them, you can see the little Schrader valve in the end. is going to stop fluid from running out of either end. So really cool setup. All right, so Eric is working on snugging up the drive shaft right now. Cross members in, trans lines connected and secured. Dipstick tube is in, so we just have to put the exhaust back under the car, and then we are going to lower it down and start filling it with fluid. All right, so Eric's filling up the transmission with fluid right now. We're gonna put about 4 quarts in it to start. Then we need to fire it up, and we'll lift it up in the air a little bit and run it through the gears, check the fluid, and then he'll run it up the road, bring it back, we'll check the fluid once more. So that's really about it for changing a torque converter in an old B body right here. Old 96. She's old. So it's cold outside, so we decided we would, you know, stay warm, hang out in the garage today, do this. Only took about 2.5, 3 hours, and now we'll have a little bit more street-friendly driving car instead of 4,000 stall, where you're always in stall, it never locks up, and so on and so forth. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching. Stay tuned. I'm going to be working on some of my stuff here shortly, so watch out for those videos, and we'll see you next time.